this was from a former director of NSA, and it's a news item, so I think we can Google it. But it said, we kill people on the basis of metadata.
Well, the point I think you make is correct, that metadata is indeed very sensitive.
Yeah.
Number one, it's the treasure map to all your data.
Welcome to Data Plus AI Security. Stories from the trenches. Real stories from the front lines where AI, data, and security collide. No theory, no hype. Just practical lessons from security leaders and operators securing modern systems at scale. Let's dive in.
Hello and welcome to inaugural Data Plus AI Security podcast. We started this podcast because the conversations that matter the most on data and AI security rarely happen on conference stages or fluffy LinkedIn posts. They happen in deployment nightmares, war rooms, late night Slack threads, and board meetings. Every week, we will unpack real stories from practitioners who are actually building, breaking, defending, and securing modern data and AI systems. Our commitment to you: no hypotheticals, theory, or marketing. Only what really works and what doesn't.
Thanks, Anand. And I'm Alyssa Kohlenberg. What drew me to this podcast is the security challenges around data and AI. They're operational, messy, and already impacting real business. Together, we'll talk with people who've been in the trenches, from founders, business and security leaders, and engineers, to understand the decisions they made, the trade-offs they faced, and the lessons they learned the hard way.
For our very first episode, we are excited to welcome Mohit Tiwari, founder and CEO of Symmetry-Systems. Mohit, thanks for joining us and helping kick this off.
Thank you guys very much for having me here.
Absolutely. Before we dive in, would you start by introducing yourself and telling our listeners a bit about your background?
Thank you. I am Mohit. I'm co-founder, one of the co-founders and CEO of Symmetry-Systems, and I work at UT Austin. Just long-term, passionate lover of both security and privacy, and very lucky that at Symmetry, we get to build systems that are both secure and aimed at privacy.
Awesome. So we will get started, Mohit, with a pretty simple question. What originally pulled you into security and data? Was that a deliberate move, or did you stumble into it and fell in love with it?
For me, the story really started when I was in graduate school. We were working on securing high assurance systems like aircraft and satellites and such, where there's this notion that there are things that are really vital. There are mission systems and data and real-time OSs, and external inputs or bad inputs should not corrupt something that's really valuable. On the flip side, we worked with NSA and General Dynamics, where there's this notion of a multi-level secure systems where top secret information should not flow into lower classified environments. And then finally, when we were working with hospitals who are looking at healthcare to be taken outside the hospitals while the data is trapped in electronic health record type of applications, there's this idea that the children's healthcare information should be shared by school nurses and social workers and so on, but just not be open for everyone. So in all these cases, we just saw the common trend is you need to understand what data you have and how is it flowing to different identities. Turned out this was a long-term field, a lot of research on it, and very privileged that we got to get together and start a company around this.
I love that, Mohit. And I think that the thing that resonated with me is that data touches every single individual, right? Every single person in US will have PHI or PII. Every person in the world has some privacy or data factors associated with their information, right? So truly, this field touches a very broad swath of the world that we live in.
It's a great point that you make, that this is very intimate to every person. Whereas a lot of times when we talk about security, it is scattered spider this and endpoint that and network this. It feels very arcane and it's sort of way deep down in the details almost. And this was a great opportunity that I can tell my daughter what I'm working on. I can tell my grandparents what I'm working on. And it just makes sense at that level.
Awesome.
So Mohit, what's the most surprising or maybe non-oblivious way you've seen sensitive data leak in real organizations, even though security controls were in place?
It's a great question. At a very large healthcare provider once, we saw that The main problem, underlying theme is that you could have teams all doing their work correctly, but at an org level, when you put it all together, bad things happen. So in this case, the identity team had really strong controls around production environments, and the sandboxes and dev and so on were much more open and open for collaboration and experiment. On the other side, the data lake team had a really strict process whereby production data would be copied into a sandbox, it would be de-anonymized, and then pushed into a production data lake, right? But in the middle, you can see that there was a sandbox environment that the data got moved into before it was cleaned up. In order to be cleaned up, that was much more open in between leaving the production environment and getting into the data lake production environment. So this type of sort of correlated failures where everyone is doing their local things correctly, but globally you have a bad outcome happen. This happens very frequently. This is almost the reason why understanding data flows across all your applications and systems is very important.
Wow, there's so much to unpack there. And I think there is an AI angle to it that I will touch upon a little bit later. But right now, I want to get into something that is maybe slightly controversial and that may require you to think deeply about the response that you provide, right? So Mohit, classification has been around for a long time. I remember deploying it like all the way to 20 years ago. Discovery has been around for a long time. They haven't driven, in many scenarios, they haven't driven a whole lot of business outcomes, right?
Yeah.
What do you do as the CEO of Symmetry or the product that Symmetry has? What does it do that differentiates it from other players in the market and drives some real business outcomes for your customers?
That's a great question. You're correct. This has been around for a long time. So one of the big problems, if we take discovery as the first step, is that discovery has long been fragmented into you have one solution for unstructured, one solution for structured, and they all work very differently. They don't talk a common language, and that's pretty bad. And I think as a solution, we have really aimed at our persona is a security team, whoever owns the risk for the entire org, they need visibility across the whole org, whether it is structured, whether it's unstructured, so Imperva Guardium, whether it is unstructured, so Varonis and Microsoft tools and so on. Like you should have to remove all the caveats. So get everywhere is a big one. And the second big one is related to discovery is that you have to be able to get into every environment, which means that often we find that we have global customers, they have data centers in the Middle East, in EU, and they have also extremely regulated environments, like for PCI scope and so on. It's very important that the security team is able to get into every environment and do so in a way that doesn't impede the other teams, right? So we actually heard from a pharma company, one of the top pharma companies, their chief data officer built a data lake, and they were very proud that they didn't even tell the security team about it, right? So I think that's not good. So having a more form of discovery that's sort of no asterisks, get everywhere, classify all the types of data. That's very important, number one. Number two, on the classification side, there are these two extremes. On the one side, we have these incumbents who are extremely static, extremely manual workflows. That doesn't work. By the time you finish classifying your data, it's out of date, and you're sort of doing it just kind of like a performative security and inventory. On the other side, we have this sort of pure play AI sort of fans who are like, one-shot learning is good enough and some magic silver bullet will just solve this problem for me. They don't recognize that enterprises are very long tail environments where there are synthetic data, there is different custom names, like things that are valuable to me that no one else knows about. I might have clinical trials data, I might have transistor yield records. So being able to build an interactive AI system that is kept live, it's not static like incumbents, but B, it's not just pure play black box one-shot learning things. It's a collaborative AI system where I can talk to it, I can give thumbs up, I can give thumbs down, I can collaborate with my humans and agents both to kind of keep it up to date and tailor it to my org. This is a very different form of building an AI product, even if you use off-the-shelf models and such. And we have deeply prioritized building a sort of non-static, but also tailored and extensible AI products for classification.
Okay. So help me understand this, right? I think you provided why classification is important, you provided why discovery is important and the different way in which Symmetry does it. But what about other factors that come into play in typical data security situation? Like, for example, identities in data or where data is stored or additional context around how data is being used, etc. What is your take on kind of how to handle that and whether that is a critical factor for enterprises?
I'm glad you bring that up because the first question was framed more around just data classification and discovery. This one, what you're saying, is actually touching, in my mind, producing outcomes and
Yes.
producing outcomes at scale. Classification is just an intermediate step to an outcome, and the outcomes have to sound like our customers. They delete petabytes of data, or they don't move petabytes of data when they move from Hadoop to BigQuery. So you're reducing risk and you're reducing cost. They're setting up automation in play whereby they find data that is old, that belongs to delinquent identities that are not under legal hold, they're not violating retention policies, and now they can be automatically sort of transitioned out into an archival environment. So these are strong outcomes on the sort of proactive cleanup side. Similarly, you have outcomes around, hey, we found 3,000 new file share servers. What data is involved here? Or we have had a ransomware threat actor is giving us samples of our customer data. Where is it located? Let's lock this whole thing down. Let's size up the breach, potential pathways. So every sentence that we say, hey, contractor was breached, like with Okta, what customer data is involved? There's always a crown jewel at 300 petabyte, whatever hundreds of petabyte scale, find that. But then there is a filter this by what are the paths, egress paths or risk paths that are valuable. So Wiz did this very well at the infrastructure layer, right? Where this is 800,000 vulnerabilities, but this matters because this is one hop away from the internet versus 3. This is the same sort of contextual graph, but at the data and identity layer. I think it makes outcomes happen, whether they are proactive cleanups or
Give us some examples of the outcomes, Mohit.
Yeah, so very concretely, we have orgs that have deleted petabytes of data, saving millions of dollars per year, moving data from Hadoop to BigQuery. We have global organizations that have set up automations in place where they are offboarding millions of files every month, right? That would have clogged up their SharePoint environment with both risk and just bills. This is on the data side, but a more interesting sort of more modern data outcome is a company, pharmaceutical company. They're using AWS Bedrock. They have a clean S3 environment, landing zone that is 350 teams are training models using AWS Bedrock on this S3. We showed that they were unstructured phone call logs containing PHI, like personal health information, that they thought they had redacted, but they hadn't, right? So these sort of things, as we enable more and more data for AI, it's on us to ensure that the data is indeed AI ready, meaning it's clean of PII, it's clean of sort of risky data. There are also identity outcomes. We can discuss them separately.
Yeah. I think one thing that I'm curious to understand is you mentioned quite a bit about regulated environments, and in regulated environments where data resides is so super critical, right? Tell me a little bit more, like what is your philosophy for managing that?
For where data resides. So I think one of the key things that I see is that when we think where in an on-prem world or even in a classic cloud world, the definition of where was intricately tied to the infrastructure layer. And we're saying that this.
Let me clarify the question, because I think what I'm trying to understand is, like in SaaS providers, right? Data flows out of the environment, goes to SaaS providers, etc. And I'm not sure if in today's supply chain driven security issues and all that, is that kind of the right thing to do, wrong thing to do? Should we take vendors at their word about them protecting a customer's data? Sometimes they say, I only get metadata. Right. It's a very wild, crazy, confusing world. So I'm looking for clarity on that.
I see what you mean. Yes. So I think one of the key things we have noticed is that our customers who have really critical data, to enable data security for them, what we do not want to do is, we as data security vendors, the first thing we say is send all your crown jewels to me to classify. We can't do that. We shouldn't do that. The second step is that we also shouldn't hide behind marketing jargon like, oh, we have an outpost architecture where we will keep your data here, but we will send metadata out. That does not work for data security.
Well, that reminds me of a quote that I saw maybe a few days ago. This was from a former director of NSA, and it's a news item, so I think we can Google it. But it said, we kill people on the basis of metadata.
Oh, yeah. Well, our customers hopefully are not yet doing that, but they'll penalize hopefully the vendors. The point I think you make is correct, that metadata is indeed very sensitive. Yeah. Number one, it's the treasure map to all your data, but also that for this data security workflows, you have to see the examples of why something got classified as PHI. We can't have that as a black box model. So to be able to interact with it, to build that collaborative workflow that we talked about, you have to see the samples. This is well known when you kind of get using it. So the fact that the vendor won't store sensitive data samples is just nonsensical. It's impossible. So the simple guarantee we want to make, and we hope the market makes, JP Morgan CISO asked for it in the open letter, is customers own their data. Just no qualifiers.
So Mohit, when organizations say, we know where our sensitive data is, how often is that actually true?
Yeah, I think where sensitive data is probably is kind of a statement that applies to an on-prem static fixed environment. Today, when we have elastic cloud environments, we are using SaaS tools, and even we are taking all the previous on-prem environments, putting MCP servers and exposing it to AI tools so that they can index and they can sort of work with those legacy applications. It's kind of an impossible statement to make because data is not stationary, it is moving. Your developers are moving it, your data lake people are moving it, they're collaborating, they're bringing in data that you should probably be careful about. So I think like, where is my sensitive data is sort of a non sequitur. It's more that, is my sensitive data exposed to identities that I want and not exposed to identities that I don't want? I think that's the abstract sentence. And now you need a system that compiles it for on-prem, for cloud, for SaaS, for AI, and all these backends.
Yeah. So you mentioned something about identities, and that exercised a thought in my mind. You hear a lot about NHI these days, right? Or non-human identities. What's your take on the risk brought on by NHIs, and how do you guys think about it from a product point of view?
Oh, that's a great question. I think a lot of the NHI discussion seems to be driven by agentic AI, right? That these are NHIs. Our lens is that NHI is typically non-human. Like this would break down into classic service roles for applications. You have database servers, app servers, etc. They can also be credentials. So someone minted API keys and such, and now those keys are lying around that can be used by either service roles or by humans. And the number 3 category really is around agents, which are these ephemeral identities that pop up and they go and touch different stuff. I do think that agents, if I run an agent on my desktop, there is no new ephemeral NHI. The agent is literally acting as me. So for as far as the rest of the world is concerned. So I don't think agentic AI is limited to NHI. So I think the agentic AI discussion is much broader. It applies to all identities, even though NHI is really the service roles or keys or service role type agents. We believe that a fundamental way to look at how any identity interacts with data, whether it is me clicking on the keyboard or whether it is Claude code clicking on the keyboard on my behalf or sending API calls, we should have eyes on. And in this way, this sort of abstract data identity representation is so much more productive rather than us chasing every new buzzword, every filter, right, for this data identity system should not be a whole separate product. Right? We should be able to just filter, like show me agent activity on data, show me third party, show me privileged, things like this.
So Mohit, I'm going to move on to a interesting thing here. And this is partially an outcome of what you mentioned when you were giving an example of the healthcare entity before, where individual teams knew what they needed to do really well, but the cross-team collaboration had the opportunity that Symmetry surfaced and made it easier, right? I see AI in a very similar way, because if you think about the historical disciplines, right, like security engineering, security operations, they were verticals, right? But AI is so horizontal in nature. It affects everyone, every team. Any deployment requires a ton of stakeholders. Any harvesting of benefits requires a ton of stakeholders, right? So I see AI as a very horizontal, collaborative discipline, right? I am, first off, I want to ask whether you agree with my explanation of how I see AI working. But second off, how does that influence your product design and your product thinking?
Yeah, I mean, I think the way you describe it is correct in that it's a very horizontal tool that is impacting everyone's work. The way we see it is we would like to help our customers secure AI identities, whether they're service roles or human identities doing the work.
Yeah.
So we see essentially 3 different bins. One is our customers' employees using AI for internal use or for the sort of like they are driving explicit use of AI. has some set of integrations that are unique to that. Another use case is sort of the server-side counterpart where, hey, we are deploying a custom stack, whether it is Llama or a customized stack based around OpenAI, but we are connecting Salesforce and Atlassian and M365 to it for customer success and so on. So these are sort of, you're using AI tools, but you're using on internal data and you're sort of sending data out to these AIs, or whether, if you're not sending them out, you're hosting it. So internal data use. And then there's also this sort of external facing applications, right? Where you, like, this is a chatbot, I'm going to expose this to my web app users. So anyone can log in and start using it, where the attack surface is much broader. So in a way, you can kind of think the identities are either Okta style corporate identities, or they are sort of Auth0 style consumer identities that are connecting into your system. And we see that we would like to essentially capture both of these types of identities behaviors as it pertains to data. So that's sort of helping our customers secure their AI. These are the bins we are seeing. But internally, we ourselves, the horizontal affects us as well. We're building out agents. We see all our internal modules essentially as tools to classify, to scan, to discover, and to work out permissions and detect anomalies. So there should be an agent, essentially orchestrator, that is driving this tool use internally. And that's just how I think it's a great way for customers to get a integration themed product suite, as opposed to a platformization themed product suite, where they have to rely on single vendor like Palo Alto to get everything. Here, we're giving best of breed products that their cloud code of, kind of endpoint quote unquote agents can just work off of.
I think my controversial take is that with AI and MCP and how easy integrations have become, I think platformization is, perhaps it was an important trend for several years, but I think we'll see a shift in the future that is kind of much more, I can stitch my own fabric together using AI and MCP.
Absolutely. I think that's a great outcome for the planet and for the end users in general. Best of breed integrations, there's no hiding behind integrations, because we can just scrape the screen if needed. Which in a funny way, it's also sort of slightly bad news for incumbent EMR, EHR providers, right? Because they've been blocking integrations for a long time. So time for customer outcomes.
So Mohit, what is one security habit that you personally follow that would surprise most people? I love this question.
So I'll go back a little while when we had to watch, so I watched cricket matches, whatever sports matches, and you were streaming this off of websites that, like, legit websites were not available that you could just pay and watch when you were in the US. So if we were logging on to random streams, they are pretty risky, these websites. So we would just have its own virtual machine, right, running off of a hypervisor and a Linux-based system. So that way, some simple browser exploit or Flash exploit doesn't, root your system and such. So I think that was probably something that's not very generally applicable, but we had to use.
So Mohit, you assembled a team of great engineers over time. I'm very curious about maybe the top 2 or 3 traits that you look for in people that you are assembling together to drive the company.
That's good. So I think the base layer trait for whatever role we are recruiting, whether it is technical, engineering, or if it's GTM, you have to be incredibly productive and competent at that role. So productivity is sort of the metric. You're sort of producing internal leading indicators very quickly, right, without getting blocked on things. I think that's very important. But that's sort of a base layer. On top of it, the top 2 themes we look at is all our engineers for a long time were all forward deployed engineers. They were all directly working with customers. You build a feature, you make one person happy before your product feature can make many people happy. So being able to commit to this motion that you will present your work to your customer, direct customer, the security team, go with them to their customer, the data lake team, and make sure that you're getting your customer the high five from the data lake team. I think that model, it's easier said than done, especially if you are an engineer who just likes to be kind of calm and code the whole time. But in our space, classifying permissions, ML for detections, all of these are such high dimensional problems that you can very easily feel very productive and build the wrong thing. In fact, that's why everything is so fragmented. So we wanted to make sure we're building something users want, right, that could be deployed and make someone happy. So that's one. Make a direct customer happy, get a high five. The second one is working under extremely poorly defined environments and tight time constraints. You have no idea how to get the next thing done. So which means temperamentally, you have to be kind of like a shock absorber for your team. You absorb chaos and spread sort of calm waves internally to your customers, to your colleagues. Again, very, very much easier said than done.
Awesome.
All right, so this is one of my favorite parts of this episode is the lightning round. So, Mohit, what is one security trend you are tired of hearing about?
I don't know. I actually I like hearing about all the security trends. I don't know if there's one that I am tired of yet.
That's fair. And do you have a person or someone that you look up to? Who inspires you?
So on the product side, I would ask end users, like, what's a product that you love in security? And for many, many years, the most common answer was Duo. And I would ask why, and they would always say, oh, we love those guys. So to me, it's really interesting kind of example of a product that they consciously made so intentionally simple, but then they layered it on with so much just execution, everything about them that they did to create customer joy. It's incredible. So yeah, I would pick all the Duo founders and teammates as people I really respect.
All right, well, Duo, if they want to come on the pod, we'll get them on here.
Yeah.
And last question, if you were not in security or tech, what would you be doing?
Oh no.
Saving the world?
Yeah, no, actually much simpler. So I grew up, my father was a forest officer, so I grew up in a forest. His job description, quote unquote, was to, get horses and elephants and go trace elephants' motion flow throughout the forest and figure out if they are all happy and healthy and such. I always thought the rangers who got to do that as a job was like the best job in the world. So I'd probably sign up for one of those jobs.
Amazing. Yeah. So, with that, Mohit, our podcast has come to an end. This was a lot of fun, and you gave us a lot of points to think about. I really appreciated hearing about your founder's perspective, your passion for this space, and how you think about the traits that make for great teams. It came through clearly how much of your work is about hard work, deep focus, and staying grounded when things get hard.
Absolutely. And I think the big takeaway for me is how often the signals are already there, but get overlooked because data and how identities are using data are not mapped. Your perspective really resonated, Mohit. So thank you.
Thanks again for joining
Thank
us,
you
Mohit.
both for hosting.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks again for joining us. And for those who are listening, we will be back with another guest and another set of real stories very soon. Thanks for spending time with us today.
Thank you again.
Thanks for listening to Data Security in the Age of AI, Stories from the Trenches. If this episode sparked a new idea or challenged how you think about AI and data security, make sure to follow or subscribe. Share it with a peer who's in the trenches with you. More real stories, hard lessons, and practical insights are coming soon. Stay sharp in the trenches.